Hey everyone, just got down to Florida, over here at the Honey Badger's house, Randall Tharp. We came down here from Lake Eufaula, and you know, he caught them, I didn't. But let me tell you what happened on that place. When we got there in practice, the lake was relatively normal, and then we got a ton of rain. Everyone saw that watched live. You saw how muddy it got. The lake had literally turned orange. I had invested all of my time, research, pre-practice, everything in the north end of that place. I've never been there before, so I did not know what that amount of rain was going to do to that place. Completely wiped out that north end for the first couple of days. So I couldn't really get that thing going, and so I basically had to adjust my first day of the tournament and run down to the south end of the lake where I felt like it would have been a little bit more protected. But then I totally just had scrapped my whole practice and started practicing. Kind of figured out a little bit of a deal at the very end of the third period. Kind of found some cleaner water, realized it had some good mats to punch down there, and then ended the day on a high note. I had caught a scoreable bass right at the end and said, you know what, I learned a little bit and I'm really excited to start day two. But I had no idea that the next day was off, and then I didn't get back out there until the second day. I had no idea that they was gonna blow the bottom out of that lake, and they sucked that thing down like 2.5 feet. And so everything, I had built this high water game plan based off the last day I fished, and then I went out there to go try to run that same game plan and realized the cypress trees that I wanted to fish and the mats I wanted to punch, they didn't have any more water on them. So then I started over again. Basically my practice just kept getting reset. And I know some guys still stayed with it and figured it out, but it was really easy to completely miss the boat because every day I had to start over, and the bite was so slow, and with the score tracker going off, you started fishing really fast, and it just wasn't a very good way to figure them out in that deal. You had to slow down and fish stuff right to get a bite. So, but I did, on a good note, I did walk out of there with, I think, a 4.9 was my biggest fish, and I caught that 4.9 punching. It was Missile D Bomb on a 3/4 ounce weight. It amazed me how shallow I caught that fish. I punched a mat, and I guarantee you it was probably about this much water, maybe 8 inches max. How much water was underneath that mat, and I was literally thinking in my head when I'm punching these mats, I'm thinking there's no water here. I'm complaining to myself thinking all the water is gone. I said there's no water here, this is not the deal. And then thunk, I catch a 4.9 right off the bat in the morning. And then the problem with that was it sucked me into punching everything in there. But you know, I just want to tell everybody it was probably one of the shallowest fish I've ever caught punching. I did not think it was possible to catch one as shallow as this one was, because the water was clear and I could see the bottom, and this one little pocket I was in, like this one little spot didn't get muddy for some reason. And I'm sitting there dangling my bait in this little section. I'm like, well, if the fish was there, I could see it. But there was one back in the shadows, and he came out and ate it, and that was the better fish I caught. And the good thing about that fish, I get to take a 4.9 with me to build for my biggest 5 fish for the heavy hitters tournament coming up with Major League Fishing. So they take our biggest fish from the first 5 events and make a 5-fish stringer, and that's what qualifies us for the heavy hitters. The top 30 out of the 80 in the MLF get to go to the heavy hitters. So I got a 4.9 for my stringer, which is better than leaving there with 0 fish. Some guys never caught a bass this whole tournament, and some guys didn't catch anything over 4 pounds. So I got a good fish to start heavy hitters. But I'll tell you one thing that for sure was a good way to catch a bass on Eufaula this week, whether it was for me or a lot of other anglers, were just winging around on a chatterbait. Now, you know, there's different ways to throw a chatterbait. I was throwing it on 20-pound fluorocarbon. I was throwing it on an Alpha Angler Zilla rod with a 8-to-1 quantum smoke PT with 20-pound Seaguar Fluorocarbon, and that was my chatterbait combo. Now, I don't like to, me personally, I don't like to use a soft chatterbait rod whenever I'm throwing a chatterbait around targets, because to me, you make that short cast, if a fish comes up and grabs your chatterbait, you make that quick hook set, and you don't have enough stiffness in the rod to drive the hook. So I find myself wanting to walk back on the deck of the boat or run back to the back of the boat to try to drive that hook. So to me, when you're fishing short range targets, I like a stiffer rod for a chatterbait, and I felt like the Zilla from Alpha Angler was perfect, and a heavy line because you're throwing it around cover. But that was my chatterbait combo this week. And then of course I was punching with the Alpha Angler mag hitter with 65-pound Seaguar Smackdown, and I also use an 8-to-1 quantum smoke reel, and I had a 3/4 Beast Coast tungsten weight with a 5/0 Gamakatsu hook rigged in a Zematoma colored Missile D Bomb, and that was my punch setup. And then swimming jigs on the cypress trees was a big deal. This is not the exact jig I was using. I've already set this up for Florida. This is the color I'm gonna throw in Florida, but I was swimming. This is my signature swim jig from Beast Coast. It's called a Gorilla swim jig. This swim jig is designed for pre-spawn, spawn, post-spawn. When you're catching big fish shallow with a swim jig and you're swimming a jig on braid, this is the swim jig that you want. It's got a big Siwash hook in it, and it's a big giant hook. So I got a little whatever trailer you want to use, it's got enough meat that if a 7-pounder grabs this thing and he engulfs this jig, this thing right here can get him in the cheek back here somewhere. But you need that gap, you need that big hook to be able to drive it somewhere in that fish, and the hook not open up, because I got 50-pound Seaguar Smackdown braid. This is a prototype Alpha Angler rod that we're working on specifically to swim this jig, but it's a stiffer rod with a little bit of tip on it because I skipped this thing a lot. The color I was swimming in that muddy water was white on top of white. I think white is a phenomenal color, and muddy water is opposite of what you would think. It's really bright, it shows up well, and those fish can't stand it in muddy water. And I was swimming it with an 8-to-1 quantum smoke PT reel. So that was my main thing. I would, and then every now and then I would pitch my flipping jig from Beast Coast up on a dock or something like that. But it was mainly covering water with a chatterbait, swimming a jig on a cypress tree, because the reason I like to swim a jig on cypress trees is because all the overhanging, when that water got high on those cypress trees, the bottom, the branches that hang off of the cypress tree get real low to the water, and it's really hard to get any other moving bait in and out of a cypress tree with all those branches hanging down without getting hung up. You need efficiency. So I want to be able to skip a swim jig back underneath those cypress tree branches, swim it, snap that swim jig, keep it high in the water column. They call it the Alabama shake. I shake that thing past those cypress trees, and when one would eat it next to the cypress tree, you could set the hook and drag him through those cypress tree branches. So and it's also the same technique I use to swim the jig around bushes and things, flooded bushes and stuff around Texas and things. So it's a good technique. But that was my deal. Now we're down here in Florida, and we're going to enjoy the next couple of days. We're probably going to shoot some footage down at one of these stick marsh lakes down here, something like that. And then after that, we're heading to Okeechobee. We start practice on Wednesday on Okeechobee, and hopefully we can have a really good tournament there and kind of reset from this tournament, because this one hurt me a little bit on points to start the season, but it's all good. It was a tough one, and it's time to put it in the rearview mirror, and we're going to focus on the next one. So follow along, and don't hesitate to ask me any questions if you want to know anything more specific about what I'm doing for pre-spawn fishing in places like Eufaula, Alabama.